Welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Education, SOA, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Arts, Distance Education, MADE, First Year. MDE 413 Learner Support Systems and Services. Block 4 Assessment of Learner Performance. Unit 3, Tutoring Through Correspondence.
3.0 Introduction. In Unit 2, we gave you an account of the types and levels of communication that take place between a distance teacher and a distance learner. We also suggested the parallels and contrasts which exist between the functions of the conventional teacher and those of the distance teachers. Besides, we suggested why comments need to be written on assignment responses and how to make the comments purposeful. This information, though valuable in itself, is not enough. In order to benefit from it at the operational level, we need to know about the difficulties and the impediments we may face in putting into practice such information and also the means for resolving those difficulties impediments. To achieve this aim, we shall be guided by a few experiments and the conclusions drawn from them. The advantage in doing so is that we will be able to present some supporting evidence for whatever difficulties we may identify and also for whatever solutions we may suggest. Consequent upon which, we hope you will be convinced that such difficulties really do exist and that they can be resolved, the realization of which is immensely significant for successful distance teaching. 3.1 Learning Outcomes. In this unit, we intend to times inform you about some fallacies which continue to stand in the way of the successful functioning of distance education programs, times identify the significant biases which stand in the way of successful two-way communication between distance learners and distance teachers, and times suggest means for overcoming these fallacies and biases. After having studied and worked through the unit, we expect you to times identify the sources causes of the fallacies mentioned above, times identify and explain the biases we have talked about, and times eradicate these drawbacks, fallacies and biases to render the much needed pedagogically purposeful two-way communication. At the operational level, you should comment on assignment responses with the understanding and care which they deserve and thus make your communication with the learners successful, i.e., you should be able to teach from a distance successfully. 3.2 Distance Teaching, Tasks and Problems. In Unit 2, we did suggest that distance teaching consists mainly of the academically useful conversation between the distance learner and the distance teacher, mediated didactic conversation in Holmberg's words, and that the basis of this conversation is in the assignment responses written by the former. What are the tasks involved in building this conversation? What are the problems in performing these tasks? Let us look into these issues in the sections that follow. 3.2.1 Tasks of a Distance Teacher. Think of this situation. A distance teacher has received an assignment. Response on the basis of which he/she is to build his/her conversation with the distance learner who has sent it. What is the distance teacher expected to do? Compensate for the weaknesses of the unit's lessons and the assignment. 2. Break the isolation of the distance learner. See Unit 2. 3. Sustain the distance learner's motivation. 4. Evaluate and grade the assignment response. We help the distance learner in improving and advancing his/her learning through purposeful comments. And 6. Answer the questions raised by the distance learner. These 6 tasks put together constitute the process of distance teaching. Let us call them the major tasks. Seemingly simple operations, these tasks require reasonable effort. Experience and experiment has shown that to perform these tasks effectively, a distance teacher needs to fulfill certain prerequisites, some of which are operational in nature and some are psychological. In other words, to perform the task of distance teaching successfully, distance teachers have to perform certain basic tasks, which we may call the minor tasks, and also approach their work with a certain required state of mind. If they do not perform the minor tasks, they can't perform the major tasks successfully, and if they do not also approach their work with the required state of mind, they can't be considered successful distance teachers and hence rendering learning through distance ineffective. 3.2.2 Challenges faced in distance teaching. What are the minor tasks which we mentioned above? And what is the required state of mind? These two questions probably come to your mind now. Let us discuss these issues in detail. The best that we can expect from an academic employed by a distance teaching institution is having specialization or expertise in particular subjects. We can't depend on his/her experience as a classroom teacher, for an equation does not exist in terms of job requirements between conventional and distance teacher. Besides, the academic comes from a particular educational culture, and we expect him/her to function in a very different one, a situation which will inevitably result in difficulties. In what we have said, we are making two assumptions which define the problems difficulties which a conventional teacher will face when he/she switches over to distance teaching. Let us put forward this assumption explicitly. A qualified academic, say, a person with an M.A.M.Sc in the relevant subject, trained for or experienced in handling face-to-face teaching and learning situations, i.e. classroom teaching learning, may not necessarily function as a successful and effective distance teacher. He/she needs certain specific skills to do so, too, besides acquiring the skills specifically needed for distance teaching. The prospective distance teacher must overcome his/her unconscious culturally induced bias. 3. If the prospective distance teacher is made aware of those biases, help to overcome them, and also given the specific skills needed for his/her new job, he/she is sure to prove successful as a distance teacher. In assumptions I and 2 above, we have stated the problems which a prospective distance teacher may face, and under assumption 3, we have suggested a solution. Once these problems are resolved with the help of the suggested solution, the tasks listed in subsection 3.2.1 can be performed successfully, i.e. the prospective distance teacher will succeed in distance teaching. To identify these problems, Call 1981 worked with a group of 58 prospective distance teachers, henceforth called trainees, who were adequately qualified in their subjects of specialization and also trained in the techniques of face-to-face teaching. These trainees were made to undergo a 30-hour training program spread over 20 days. The training program comprised lectures, reading assignments, take-home assignments, workshop sessions, discussions, preparation of reports and evaluation of course materials and assignments. The program as a whole was divided into 3 phases: pre-teaching tasks, problems and solutions. Phase 1 presented in this unit. Teaching tasks, problems and solutions. Phase 2 discussed partly in this unit as commenting, and in Unit 3 as grading. Post-teaching tasks, problems and solutions. We shall consider these issues as and when required. 3.3 Teaching through distance as two-way communication. Usually a conventional teacher assumes that, given his/her subject, expertise and training, he/she can teach through the distance mode with the same quality as in a classroom situation. But is this assumption tenable? Does a distance teacher need to perform any pre-teaching tasks? Is there any specific preparation needed for distance teaching? And if the teacher needs this preparation, to what extent would he/she be willing to undergo it? Let us look for answers to these questions. 3.3.1 Problem of motivation. The 58 trainees mentioned above were told about the relevance of distance education and the strengths and weaknesses of the written word as a medium of academic communication. This lecture was followed by a workshop session which began with a few instructions. Hence, all of them considered themselves as distance teachers, and whatever tasks were assigned to them, they performed with the role in mind, though their perceptions of what a distance teacher should or should not do in a particular situation was left to their judgments. In the workshop session, they were asked, to study a teaching unit which was prepared for distance learners, and 2. To prepare a brief outline of its contents which could be used to teach in distance to the learners for whom the unit was prepared. After the reading exercise was over, it was found that only 46% of the trainees showed interest in the exercise by preparing fairly accurate content outlines, 18% showed a half-hearted interest, 20% showed indifference, and 16% showed distrust as they returned blank sheets of paper. The first step in distance teaching is to study the teaching unit, to get acquainted with its actual contents, its scope, and the depth of treatment. It is not suggested that the distance teacher has to learn the contents, for he/she already is a subject expert. However, he/she must see what the course writers want to achieve through it. As already mentioned, only 46% of the trainees showed an inclination to perform this initial task. There could be three possible reasons why the trainees may have shown complete or partial disinterest in this exercise. These are: had the trainees been informed in explicit terms that they were to read the unit with a view to correcting assignment responses based on the unit, they would have studied it thoroughly. 2. As the theme of the unit was familiar, known to all the trainees, it might not have attracted their attention. 3. The trainees had little motivation to do the task and were thus not favorably inclined even to take the very first step in the process of distance teaching, i.e., to study the teaching unit and prepare a brief content outline. The first of these views reasons may be correct, but it does not explain why 46% of the trainees did really show interest in the exercise, though they too had no additional explicit or implicit information about the purpose. So, the first view does not account for the complete data. The second view reason too fails to explain the whole data, i.e., if the topic was familiar and therefore held no attraction for some readers, it should have been so for all the respondents. There seems to be a lot of strength in the third view reason. It is trainee-centered, unlike the first two reasons, and sees that depending upon the degree of their motivation, the trainees either did or did not study the unit properly. Obviously, the problems of motivation or of desirable attitudes are not exclusively learner-centered issues. It is not only the distance learners who face problems caused by the lack of motivation. Distance teachers too face them, and they need to overcome them before they can do any good to the distance learners. However, there could be many other causes for the phenomenon discussed above, some of which we will now discuss. 3.3.2 Problem of isolation. On being informed that only 46% of them had shown interest in the first exercise, one could see that some of the trainees felt sorry, while others were amused about it. We were now ready for the second workshop session, which started with a lecture about a checklist that could be used to assess the strengths and weaknesses of the unit lesson under consideration as a self-instructional unit. It was explained that the checklist consists of the following points. Are there any access learning aids such as glossaries, self-check exercises, summaries, etc., built into the unit? If so, are they explicit and effective? 2. Have the objectives of the unit been stated? 3. Does the content agree with the objectives? If yes, does it maintain a desirable standard? 4. Does the structure of the unit conform to the principles of course design? If yes, does it promise to contribute the maximum possible to the learning process? It was suggested that the above checklist could be used for an adequate assessment of any course unit. So, it was used to evaluate the given unit that they were working on. To perform this task, the group of trainees was divided into 15 smaller groups, with at least 3 trainees in each group, which was then asked to perform the following 3 tasks. read the same unit more carefully than before. 2. Discuss, within the group, the content and the various features of the unit. 3. Prepare a report, group-wise, on the strengths and weaknesses of the unit on the basis of the checklist given above. The exercise was done, and the group reports were submitted. It was interesting to note that in spite of repeated readings of the unit and group discussions within the framework of the checklist provided for the purpose, the assessment of the unit made by various groups did not match with one another on some of its most significant portions. It was a clear indication of the fact that distance teachers, trainees in this case, may be isolated from one another, i.e., they think differently, react and respond to a unit differently. Thus, it is not only the distance learners, but also the distance teachers who have to face the problem of isolation. Of course, the nature of isolation in the two cases must differ. Obviously, the various groups interpreted the unit and its structure differently insofar as the points of emphasis in the report prepared by them differed quite clearly, and some of the groups were not ready to change their stand even after they were allowed time once again to discuss the issue amongst themselves. This exercise points to the fact that a distance teacher may take a definite and rigid personal stand about the content, the structure, and the purpose of a unit, and his/her stand may or may not be in agreement with what is intended by those who prepare the unit. This isolation, as indicated by the disagreements mentioned above, is a serious issue. In most of the cases, various distance teachers will be working on the same unit with hundreds of learners. These distance teachers need to interpret the units in nearly the same way, otherwise, different messages will go to different groups of learners. One way to overcome this difficulty is that the structure of the unit be clear, thematic presentation be unambiguous, and that provision be made for giving an adequate orientation to distance teacher wherever necessary. This brings in a strong argument for training distance teachers before they are commissioned for the task of distance teaching. 3.3.3 Problem of study skills from the second workshop described in subsection 3.3.2 above. We moved on to the third workshop, which in effect was an extension of the second one. Now, all the group reports were put together in an open session. The weaknesses of each report were identified, and a better understanding of the structure and the content of the unit was developed by moderating the inconsistencies in them, removing internal contradictions, weeding out some baseless remarks, etc. For example, Group 12 had written that each section of the unit had an adequate range of self-evaluation exercises. Group 3 wrote that the self-evaluation exercises did not cover all the points presented in the unit. After a long discussion, we succeeded in effecting convergence in the course unit writers' views, and the objectives of the unit were used as focal reference points. Consequently, a collectively agreed upon understanding of the structural and thematic components of the unit was accomplished. During this long discussion, it was realized that at least one of the reasons for divergent views and reports was the difference in the level of study skills which the trainees brought into use to prepare those reports. Some of the trainees did not appear to bother about the details, some appeared to interpret words and phrases too literally, some attached as much importance to essential details as they did to non-essential ones. An interesting example, one remarked that there was no spelling mistake in the unit, though such mistakes did exist. There, obviously, no two people can have exactly the same range of study skills, but if the differences in study skills are going to affect the interpretation of units, something needs to be done to help the prospective distance teachers, which, again, points to the proposal that they need to be trained. Once again, we need to remind ourselves that study skills do not pose problems only for learners, they also pose problems for distance teachers. This, however, is not to suggest that conventional teachers do not face these problems. In fact, they face them as well, but we need not go outside the context at this moment. 3.3.4 Summative comments. In this subsection, we have attempted to identify three common fallacies which we need to take note of. It is commonly believed that distance learners face the problems of motivation, isolation, and lack of study skills. With these acceptances, it is suggested that distance teachers must help learners to overcome these problems. However, it is observed that uninitiated distance teachers themselves face the same problems. It is therefore quite possible that an uninitiated distance teacher cannot effectively help a distance learner. It is only a highly motivated distance teacher who can motivate learners. Only a distance teacher who has overcome his/her own isolation can help distance learners in breaking their isolation. Finally, it is only a distance teacher with his/her mastery over a variety of study skills can help distance learners in improving their study skills. These fallacies pertaining to the three factors, motivation, isolation, and study skills, have their roots in the unconscious culturally induced biases of our society of which the teaching community is a part, having grown up in the classroom situation and having acquired the education it provides. The conventional teacher unconsciously develops a few biases, including the belief that the problems mentioned above are exclusively those of the learners. One of the ways to break these biases is to get exposed to them, as we did in our experimentation with 58 trainees. We attacked these biases by slow degrees while exposing their weaknesses one by one. The trainees had to see and be convinced that not all of them would take interest in reading a teaching unit, 2. Not all of them would assess the quality of the unit accurately, and 3. It needs considerable effort to see the teaching unit from the viewpoint of the course unit writers. This attack was reinforced by lectures and discussions arranged in between various workshops. The themes touched upon were time's social acceptability and academic tenability of distance education, times socio-economic significance of distance education, and times the question of equivalence with regard to face-to-face education and distance education. By the end of this first phase of the experiment, the trainees were convinced that in order to interpret a unit from the viewpoint of the course writer, one could not depend exclusively on one's own knowledge of the stated theme of the unit, that the unit needs to be studied appropriately in terms of its theme as well as structure, and that they do face the problems of motivation, isolation, and study skills, which they need to overcome if they want to function effectively as distance teachers. 3.4 Distance teaching. In the second phase of the training program, the trainees were made to work on assignment responses pertaining to the unit they had worked through in phase I, which we have described in section 3.3 above. All the 58 trainees were given A. An assignment on the unit which they had studied in phase I, B. 9 responses to this assignment prepared by 9 different distance learners who had studied the unit earlier and worked on the assignment. Having handed over the copies of the assignment and the 9 responses to all the trainees at the same time, we asked them to teach those 9 learners in a distance mode, i.e., evaluate the response and write whatever comments they thought appropriate. With this began the actual process of teaching in distance. 3.4.1 Distance teaching, a 4-step process. Having studied the teaching unit and assessed its weaknesses and strength, structural as well as thematic, the distance teacher must be able to assess the assignment too, so that he/she may assess the responses in the light of the characteristics both of the corresponding unit and other learners. The process that follows appears to consist of 4 steps. The distance teacher must understand, from the point of view of the course writer, what the assignment demands from the learner, and build what may be called the assessor's ideal response, AIR, for short, to the problem posed in the assignment. AIR is essentially a hypothetical answer, for the distance teacher is not expected to write it down, though in subjects like mathematics or physics this can also be the real answer. An assignment response, which matches the AIR of the concerned assessor, i.e., the distance teacher, will be rated high. Thus, AIR serves as a measure for the assessment of the various responses the distance teacher receives. 2. Having decided on the AIR, the distance teacher must be able to discover such weaknesses in the responses as might be traced back to the weaknesses defects of the assignment and/or the teaching unit. This ability on the part of the distance teacher is of great pedagogic significance. If the distance teacher is carried away by his/her own AIR, irrespective of the weaknesses of the assignment and the teaching unit, his/her assessment of the response is likely to be biased and most probably the comments made will be lopsided. 3. Thirdly, the distance teacher has to consider the organization aspects of the responses. Here, he must take into account how the response has begun, what the middle is like, and how effective the ending is. Considerations like the logical development of the response, the language used, its correctness and clarity, the presentation of arguments, etc., come under the organizational aspects of the response. Here, again, the distance teacher will depend on his/her AIR. However, it is possible for a distance teacher to be carried away by the language and style of a response, despite poor or even irrelevant content. It is therefore necessary that fairly precise values are assigned to the various organizational aspects of responses. 4. Lastly, the distance teacher must grade the responses, and this grade should very clearly be reflected in the comments he writes on the response. These comments may have one, more, or all of the following functions: A. Keep the distance learner motivated, i.e., on the course. B. Break the walls of isolation which the distance learner is surrounded by, and C. Help the learner improve his/her learning through comments that teach, i.e., the teaching type comments. See Unit 2. Whatever may be the occasion of these comments, whether they are written as comments on responses, as explanation for the grades awarded, as replies to letters or representation, the distance teacher has to direct his/her efforts towards one aim, namely to effect teaching successfully. Can an uninitiated distance teacher perform these tasks satisfactorily? 3.4.2 Assessor's Ideal Response, AIR, to answer the above question. We once again turn to the activities of our experimental group of 58 trainees. To build appropriate links in the argument, please turn to the introductory note under section 3.4. Above, the trainees had already gone through the unit thoroughly. See section 3.3 when they were asked to study the assignment and prepare notes indicating what each of them thought was the ideal response to the assignment. Only 51 airs were collected, as 7 of the trainees did not take part in this activity. It is interesting, even in a sense incredible, that only 4 airs depicted an accurate understanding of the assignment, while the rest touched upon items which were not dealt with in the unit. You recall that all the trainees had agreed to a common interpretation of the unit, see section 3.3, yet when it came to the preparation of the airs they ignored this consensus. Most probably, in an attempt to prepare a good answer response, most trainees depended on their own knowledge of the subject matter while formulating their airs. It appeared as if bits of the teaching unit and the assignment and the focus became invisible to them and were lost by many of them. This phenomenon brings to light yet another aspect of unconscious, culturally induced bias, UCIB, for short. It is quite likely that, while assessing the assignment responses, the uninitiated distance teachers will look at the assignment in terms of their own subject expertise, rather than what is available and/or intended in the unit lesson concerned. Such a bias must affect both the process of distance teaching, in the sense of making purposeful comments, and the process of assignment, in the sense of grading the responses. Let us stop for a moment and think of ways to solve this problem. One answer to this question is that the course-writer prepares an outline of the ideal response and sends it to the distance teacher to guide him/her in assessing the responses. Another way is that the distance teacher is oriented towards using the unit concerned along with the corresponding assignment to build an ideal response. Whatever may be the case, the distance teacher should not start assessing responses before he conceives the ideal answer, not necessarily in writing, for otherwise the assessment is bound to be faulty. 3.4.3 Assessor's Comments. Please turn to the last sentence in subsection 3.4.1. It is a question, to which we replied only partially in subsection 3.4.2. Now, we shall present another part of the answer. After the trainees had finished writing their airs, they were asked to assess and write comments on the first 3 of the 9 responses. This exercise was given ample time and was attended by only 50 trainees. Of these 50, 8 did not write any comments at all. Data on the nature of the comments is presented in the table below. You will notice from the table that out of 222 comments written, 29.8% were hollow comments, 54% were negative comments, the highest among all, and only 3.6% were teaching type comments, 2% positive, and 0.4% constructive multiplier types. Of these, we picked up 87 non-teaching type comments to analyze the variations in the focus of the comments. 30 comments of the negative type, 432 words, attacked the content of the responses. 23 negative comments, 160 words, focused on errors in the language used, and 1 negative comment, 54 words, attacked the organization of the response, and 6 comments, 41 words, were quite rude. It is true that the comments on the content, the language used, and the organization of the responses presented are desirable, as they are pedagogically relevant, but unless they are desirable and constructive, they turn out to be of the non-teaching type and serve no real purpose at all. Some distance teaching may have taken place at this stage, but it is clear that such teaching was not effected consciously. In any real distance teaching situation, the teacher would have gone for global type comments, which does not happen here. What could be the causes of this phenomenon? In the first place, we believe that if an assessor's ideal response is defective, as was the case with many of them in this experiment, see subsection 3.4.2 for details, the comments are bound to be off the point. Secondly, an uninitiated distance teacher, because of his unconscious culturally induced bias, handles assignment responses the way she would mark an exercise book or an examination answer book. In the former case, he marks the mistakes to be looked into by the learner and, if possible, discuss them. In the later case, he puts dashes and crosses here and there and then puts the marks or a grade at the top of the response. In either case, there is no room for any kind of comment, not to speak of teaching type comments. The writing of comments in such case is a rare phenomenon. Thirdly, once again, because of his/her unconscious culturally induced bias, the uninitiated distance teacher feels most concerned with the content of a response and feels satisfied if he marks his/her disagreement or disapproval, that he has to write teaching type and global comments does not appear to him/her to have any importance. However, to draw the above conclusions after just one trial may not be reasonable. Accordingly, we asked the trainees to take up another set of 3 assignment responses, i.e., numbers 4, 5, and 6, for assessment and write comments on them. 3.4.4 Improved didactic communication. Before the trainees started their second exercise, i.e., writing comments on assignment responses 4, 5, and 6, they were instructed, as a rule, to I. Write comments and 2. Try not to write harmful comments. Moreover, each one of the trainees wrote comments, unlike in the first attempt when 8 trainees didn't write any comments at all. This second exercise in writing comments was followed by a series of lectures and seminars covering topics like tutor comments, non-teaching and teaching type comments, the pedagogic and psychological purpose of such comments, the significance of two-way, purposeful communication, and the main role of a distance teacher writing comments to help the distance learner improve his/her performance. We notice that global comments were written for the first time during the third exercise, too. The percentage of teaching type comments went up by 20.7% from 13.5% to 34.2%, and 3. The percentage of negative comments came down by 21.1% from 61.5% to 40.4%. However, the percentage of hollow comments recorded marginal rise, showing that it may not be so easy to do away with them. Besides, even at this stage, no trainee wrote any personal level comments. But more and more experience, we believe, should help the distance teacher overcome these weaknesses. It is evident that uninitiated distance teachers can't enter into purposeful communication with distance learners straight away. They might do so successfully as they get more and more experience, which may take a long period of time. A trained distance teacher, on the other hand, should be able to function purposefully right from the very beginning of his/her career. In essence, the conventional teacher will have to do away with the unconscious culturally induced biases, UIBs, to make his/her way as a successful distance teacher. 3.5 Teaching through technological medium. Technological medium offers two kinds of communication: synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous communications are those which occur at a time when at least two individuals are available at their own ends through online mode. But in case of asynchronous communication, an individual can respond to information and/or seek information from others while they are absent at their end. Examples of synchronous communication would be online chatting, virtual counseling sessions, etc. On the other hand, communication through wiki, whiteboard, etc. are considered as asynchronous. On many occasions, email communication is also considered as synchronous communication. The commonality among all these communications is that they require technological equipment such as computer and internet service. It implies that the internet and World Wide Web (WWW) have significant contribution in teaching learning paradigm for the interaction and collaboration among all and between distance teachers and learners. According to Jung et al., 2002, interaction in web-based instruction showed that the social interaction group outperformed the other groups, and the collaborative interaction group expressed highest level of satisfaction with their learning process. Thus, teaching through technology includes social, collaborative, and academic interactions. Salmon, 2002, says that interactions as activities, task online, can be organized through both synchronous and asynchronous technologies. Further, she expresses that activities, task online, are purposeful to motivate and encourage the participants in serious learning. There are a few tools used while tutoring a distance student through technological medium. These are online chat, 2. Wiki, 3. Email, 4. Discussion forum, video conferencing, 6. Whiteboard, online chat. Online chatting is a real-time business which facilitates learners to have dialogue with their peer groups and teachers for clarification and/or understanding of some facts, issues, or events. According to Panda and Mishra, 2008, online chat may both precede and succeed a discussion forum. Chatting can be used effectively as tutorials on one-to-one basis or in a group situation. with the availability of VoIP and Skype technologies, chats can also be organized using audio and video, and thus participants can organize audio and video conferences in a real-time situation, thereby discussing, debating, and reflecting on a topic. Wiki, Auger et al., 2004, say that wikis are excellent tools for collaboration in an online environment. It enthralls the learners to collaborate and work on the content using a standard web browser. It is a platform where a website and a Word document integrate. The uniqueness of this platform is that even an individual can edit the content without even knowing the HTML uses. A wiki user can add, delete, and edit the contents as and when he/she desires. Further, when a person edits the previous content, the content is never deleted. It is archived and, depending on its necessity, it can be retrieved. This facility helps a tutor to track and assess the students' record on their work on wiki contents. Kress and Kimmel, 2008, expressed that individual learning happens in a wiki due to internal processes of assimilation and accommodation. Email being the priority tool of communication, encapsulates interaction and collaboration among learners and between learners and tutors. This system encourages email facility to interact with mentor. Maintain dialogue among learners. Watt, 1995, reported that teaching through electronic mail should be supported by other communication media, and it is useful to send course materials to the participants and do large mailings quickly. Discussion forum, Murray and Mara, 2005, demonstrate that learners are expected to share experiences, negotiate meanings, and construct knowledge within discussion forums. Discussion forum encourages and engages through teaching, cognitive and social presence, reflection in participants for higher order thinking and critical reflection. Owen, 1993, writes, asynchronous communication is, in my view, essentially reflective and responsive communication. Capturing or downloading the electronic text for reading offline or in printed form, for instance, is something we encourage our students to do so that they may feel free to contribute to whatever ways they find appropriate, and at times they feel it is appropriate as well. I believe this happens best when people have had a chance to reflect on their experience, consider the language they would choose to express their ideas, and compose their ideas to their own satisfaction. p.141. Sometimes, the participants may be encouraged to initiate, lead, and conclude a synchronous discussion on self-chosen topics. This provides more opportunities for deeper thinking and self-reflection. Discussion forums are generally meant to motivate for self-study, have a group feeling, and provide an opportunity to express one's ideas and views and also to critique those ideas. Panda Mishra, 2008. Video conferencing, the use of full motion video to see and hear two or more persons in two or more locations is referred to as video conferencing. It could be delivered through two types of technologies: Internet Protocol, IP, based, and Integrated Services Digital Network, ISDN, based, ACAR, 2007. It could also be room-based or desktop-based. However, with the growth of Internet and WWW, the use of desktop IP-based video teleconferencing has increased in education to provide synchronous visual inputs. Web-based video conference promotes reflection through synchronous communication, narratives, debriefings, one-to-one and group supervision, etc. It allows partnerships among peers, exchange perspectives and gain understanding in a collaborative manner. Daly et al. 2008. However, video conferencing sessions are often critically dependent on the expertise of the facilitator, who normally retains the control. Hedestic and Kaptelin in 2005. In a study on success factors in video conference mediated instructions, Salem 2005 concluded that technology reliability, learners perceived usefulness of the system and learners' benefit in terms of grades and coursework quality improvement are critical to the success of video conference. In a recent study, Stafford and Lindsay, 2007, concluded that the internet-enabled video conferences appeal more to socially oriented students than they do to students with a low social orientation. Fung and Woodruff, 2003, after analyzing the use of digitized video for professional development of teachers concluded that teachers' professional frames, content, subject matter expert, form, teacher technician, pedagogy, master teacher, and media, video producer, allow them to look at video from different perspectives. Thus, the use of video conferencing for CPD would be highly useful for promoting social presence, reflection, and collaborative learning. Also, it is important to note that costs are lower for IP than asynchronous transfer mode ATM based video conferences. Akar 2007. Whiteboard. The use of electronic whiteboard in conventional classrooms is probably the most significant change in classroom learning in the last decade. But, in spite of increased motivation of teachers and students in the classroom, they seem to have little measurable impact on student achievement. Higgins et al. 2007. On the web, Whiteboard is primarily used as an add-on to the synchronous video conferences to create virtual classrooms. The use of Whiteboard or a scratchpad alongside the synchronous communication system allows all participants to see each other, talk to each other, and permits them to share the whiteboard to draw, write, and present prepared materials from multiple sites. Plageman and Gobel 1999. Thus, it creates a classroom-like familiar situation, both for the students and the teacher. The visual medium can promote reflection through collaborative interaction, brainstorming, sessions and group project work in real-time mode. Using the synchronous whiteboard, instructors in a medical education scenario could spontaneously interact with the students. Ounce, 2005, says that the use of synchronous broadcast lesson over the internet is a useful technique for teaching medicine to students residing in remote places. Beaumont Kerridge, 2007, described the system of synchronous conferencing system with whiteboard, voice internet, protocol extended reach, Viper as commercial name, and reported the evaluation of the system as more engaging due to visual appeal, interaction and the web browser capture facility. Panda Mishra, 2008. 3.6 Summary. We identified and discussed a few fallacies pertaining to the notions of motivation, isolation and study skills. We concluded that problems of motivation, isolation or study skills don't trouble learners only, as is commonly believed, but also the distance teachers who need to overcome them to work effectively. Secondly, we tried to emphasize that most of the weaknesses of conventional teachers functioning as distance teachers arise from the biases which conventional educational culture forces on them. We identified some of these biases and suggested ways to overcome them. Finally, we outlined the process of distance teaching, showing what difficulties may arise at different stages of the process and how those difficulties may be resolved. If we turn to the list of items in subsection 3.2.1, namely, the tasks of a distance teacher, we notice that we have yet to talk about I. The problems involved in grading, and 2. Answering the questions raised by the distance learners. We have already discussed grading in Unit 1 and answering the questions etc., i.e. supplemental communication, in Unit 4 of this block. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.